to last many generations. Why shouldn't we stand up and go against such a government? Ms. Tania Chen. Thank you, Madam Deputy. Well, I think I can have more eye contact with Madam Deputy. With Mr. Leung, well, Mr. Leung rarely looks at the member speaking. I wanted to see the FSCR. After all, we are having an appropriation bill debate, but I couldn't find the FS. It is understandable that they take turns to attend our debate, but I think this is directly relevant to his portfolio. Well, he might or might not have the chance to do another term, but given his attitude, I don't know whether he would be reappointed. Some people say that, well, you don't know how to spend money you have. Well, the government has got lots of money, and he will ask somebody to spend it on his behalf. I'm going to talk to the press later. Well, our country parks are very good, and yet they're asking a study to be conducted on the periphery of the country parks. In fact, they're exactly at the periphery of our country parks. So who has ignored our law? The Hong Kong Housing Society is an NGO, and yet it is going to spend its own money on illegal studies on how the periphery of our country parks should be developed. It is urged on by, spurred on by Siwa Leung. I want to talk about the Secretary for Home Affairs. He assumed office in 2015, and the first thing he did was to hand over the Tsim Sha Tsui East Waterfront Promenade to property developer. At first, it was just the Avenue of Stars. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on greening, and it doesn't matter because New World has got the money, so we can just damage the greening, and then we should. They want to use the waterfront promenade for alfresco dining, which only the rich can patronize, and they want performing venues there. And because New World has just purchased the Nickel Hotel, so they want to turn the waterfront promenade into different hubs for different facilities. And at the clearance just of Shangri-La Hotel, suddenly they wanted to build a museum for the film industry, and they even compared that to the one in Shanghai, where they have a floor space of over 30,000 square feet, and then here we've got only 3,000 square feet. Well, and then they dare to say that it's to pay tribute to the movie industry, and that is ridiculous. We could see, or we can enjoy the beautiful harbor at the waterfront promenade. You want to have a better vantage point, you go to the footbridge, and they want to put decks there so that you can enjoy the harbor view at different heights. Well, it's just the ground floor and the first floor. And LCSD and New World, or company, an NGO wholly owned by New World, put a joint submission to the TBD. Perhaps it offended some developers, which lodged a judicial review against that plan, and subsequently it was withdrawn. And then even Carrie Lam went to see what's wrong. All right, the Avenue of Stars is now all hoarded up. Nobody can access it anymore. I've got photos of the Avenue of Stars. I can show you how ugly it was. it was an eyesore, and there were trucks there to serving as food kiosks, but they were entirely abandoned, and then the paint fell off, sprawling. And then for one truck, it was put or shielded by behind the bushes, but it could easily be seen. So LCSD could do such a thing, and LCSD would dare to renew the agreement with New World, even though the first contract that lasted for 20 years had yet to expire. Now, talk about the AMO. I must comment on the AMO. This is outrageous. This AMO murdered many heritage buildings and monuments in Hong Kong. Civic organizations tried our best to salvage them, and then when we saw any threat, we went to do it. The Emporium Theatre was one example. It was first graded as a certain class of monument, and then fortunately some NGOs did lots of research and into people who have performed there. And I grew up in North Point. I frequently went to the Emporium Theatre. Now, we're not talking about collective memory. We are talking about very good justifications to conserving places with good social and architectural and civic value. And then there was a so-called expert panel to examine or to grade buildings with the potential of becoming graded buildings. We asked for the scores, but our request was turned down. I asked AMO time again for the marking sheet for Hong Lau, because after decades, Hong Lau was still regarded as a historic building. It was never graded as provisional monument, for instance. We asked for the marking sheet, but it was the request was persistently refused. So we wanted to know how the marking was done. Now, even for S3 students, there is a TSA, and there should be a score sheet for that building. The government is going to provide resources for maintenance and conservation, and the scores are never reviewed to the public. AMO is just a very small office under the LCSD. If it hasn't got sufficient resources, it should speak out. The problem is it has never done anything right. Take Cochrane Street as an example. Civic organizations, Madam Deputy, at first, the street was not graded at all, not even now. But then civic organizations use open information to show that for the tenement buildings, the 2 tenement blocks, they were built in the 18, and then now there is this Mr. Lee, a printer there, and we were told that it that Casdev Street, we thought that there were foreign prostitutes there, and so it was called Hong Mo Gil Street. And then further research told us that in fact an American captain came to Hong Kong, and he brought with him a Chinese maid from Guangdong, and his mistress, so on and so forth. And then the American captain had to return to the U.S., and then he gave that street to his girlfriend as a gift. So this lady's Chinese name is Gil, and she used that street to serve foreigners. And that's why we have tenement buildings back to back there, because prior to that date, buildings could be built that way, but because of sanitary reasons, that was banned. And as a result, in between tenement buildings built afterwards, there is always a lane in between. And so Hong Kong has been law-abiding, and we know why, how come there were tenement buildings there built back to back. And then we're told that all information was destroyed in the Second World War, so none could be found. And because the buildings were only, the relevant legislation was only enacted in 1803, but then we're told that perhaps the building or the builders broke the law. We could find documents showing rates payments before 1903. We've got building plans and photos. We're told that perhaps the developer had violated the legislation. That's interesting. How come buildings that were unauthorized or built flouting the law could be kept there for more than 100 years? So, and all who were involved had passed away. Of course, we could not ask them to find out the truth. I've only got a few minutes left to talk about the Palace Museum. There is a JR in progress, so I cannot comment too much on that. We may recall on the 23rd of December last year, I was about to enjoy a winter solstice dinner with my mum, and suddenly I received this good news that at WKCD we're going to have a Palace Museum there. But it was strange. How come we were never informed? And then in the memorandum, there is this term. Within 6 months after the memorandum was signed, the two parties could withdraw peacefully. And some journalists, including members, asked, now, that 6 months would only expire on the 23rd of June this year. Given that there was such opposition from the community, perhaps we should pause and rethink and conduct a proper public consultation before we proceed. Unfortunately, the government is recalcitrant. It did the so-called public consultation, and then that was to end on the 8th of March. By the way, it extended that by 2 weeks. And then, according to the administration, the community maintained an open mind as far as the construction of the museum was concerned. Well, when I was at the meeting of the WKCD meeting, I wonder if I had heard carefully, because Mr. Lau Gong-wah replied to a question by Ms. Claudia Mo on the 8th of February 2017 as to whether it's an option for the memorandum of understanding to be voided. And then Mr. Lau told us that it was not an option. And then WKCDA changed its position. It said that it maintained an open mind. Is it all because of the judicial review? As a result, it has to face up to the reality. As I said, it was a fake, a bogus public consultation.
Under the law, for consultation has to be not a consultation that should be having preconceived ideas. But when the Palace Museum was put to public consultation, it said it has to be put on WKCD, and it will be completed in 2022. And the whole job has been given to Rocco Yim. And I think the members of the public have been used in the consultation exercise. The whole consultation exercise is so sloppy. It doesn't measure up to the fundamental requirement of public participation. Lau Kong-wah hasn't done a good enough job. I hope that he will not serve on for another term. Mr. Lam Kwok-hong, Madam Deputy, this is part of the debate. Normally, members would debate whether the head should stand part of the bill. On my way down in the lift, there were two things that left a deep impression in me. The first one is a CID from Central Police Station rang me up and asked me whether I'm in the Let's Go. I said yes. And he said he's coming along at 1:45, some documents to me. I think it was about Mr. Eric Ma, Secretary for Development. I got hold of his file at a meeting, and I was asked. I asked whether the information has been leaked, and whether he called the police, and he didn't answer me, Madam Deputy. This is all about our function. Under the Basic Law, our mission, our function is to scrutinize the annual Appropriation Bill, which disperses funding to the government. It is the same thing, basically. It is rather strange. Old Arab leaked the information. The government didn't call the police. Mr. Eric Ma lost information, lost his laptop, and nothing happened. Secretary Lee that you're asking for a new post regarding the computer affairs. Has he sought any advice from you? Now, for the Development Bureau, I don't think we should disperse 1 single cent to it. I've never prepared any script. I've never asked my assistant to gather loads of information for me to read out, but from memory, I can say that 2 days ago, I raised the question about the 10 casualties involved in the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, and I saw that Ov Arab is also one of the consultants in the project. Now, the 10 lives that were lost, I said this yesterday, I'm not repeating this. There are 2 mainland companies. One is Zhunhua. The other one is another China company. Now, Ov Arab is a consultant. It should cover the safety measures. Ov Arab has a very strong relationship with Mr. Eric Ma. That the owner is, of course, the Hong Kong government. The contractors are the red capital companies, and they are the consultants. Now, let's not talk about the shifting of the foundation. Let's just talk about the 10 lives that have been lost. Has the consultant done anything? It's not just about speed. It's all about safety measures. They have to make sure that everything is safe. The working platform can shift, and people are working on the working platform. They don't have any separate lifeline or harness. when they fell into the sea, the harnesses became a fatal, a lethal harness. And it doesn't make sense that the working platform could shift. I mean, when they fell in, they were dragged into the sea. You knew that they might die. I just let them die. I mean, there is a very heart-rending story. And someone asked him, "Why do you want to kill him?" And he didn't say anything, but that bloke was killed. Now the policeman is coming along at 1:45, and I might be summoned to court on such and such a date. I don't know. The secretary has committed dereliction of duty twice. The person that should be disciplined hasn't been disciplined. Mr. Lee, I think you have to reprimand Mr. Eric Lee. Now, he lost his laptop, and there's dishonest use of the computer. That you're seeking funding from LegCo. Why don't you ask Mr. Eric Ma whether he didn't call the police? We can't discharge our function here. And I grabbed the file, and I didn't read the file. That there are so many bad guys in the street. And there are so many people who are insulting the police, and the police are meeting the other members of the public every single day. Have you done anything? Do we have any justice and fairness in this council? I am a councillor here. I'm not treated half as well as an average citizen. Even if you take me to court 1,000 times or 10,000 times, I'm going to do it in the same way. The secretary hasn't done his job, and he's taking the case to the police. I'm not part of the state machinery. I'm here to monitor the state machinery, and machinery is coming and get me. When Deputy over has gone over the budget and is leaking the confidential information, but there is no penalty. The penalty should be to, or the penalty was to ban the company from 3 months of tendering. Now, if I throw something, you would not just stop me for one item on the agenda. I think this is all about corruption. The other thing that I feel very strongly is that Dr. Martin Lau made a passionate speech, and he said the Pandams are hijacking the council. How can we hijack the council? There is no way I can hijack the council, Madam Deputy, because you are in the majority as always. Whatever you want happen in LegCo, it will happen. Like you say that we are making quorum call in order to filibuster. You accusing us of filibustering. If we're repeating ourselves, so you can stop us. Our amendments have been looked at by the president. And Dr. Martin Lau is saying that we're filibustering and we're causing an anarchy in the council. What's the definition of anarchy, Mr. Edward Lau? Why don't you look up the dictionary? Anarchy is a political state. We do have the government. We have an unwieldy government which is riding roughshod over us. Now, the government is performing badly. I am making my speech not because I am speaking for myself. I'm speaking for those who don't have a voice here. I'm not here to please the administration. I'm here to keep the government on its toes. I'm not here to prove for the government's legitimacy. I'm here to prove the government's illegitimacy. This is a debate. This is not anarchy. What is the definition of the government? The definition of government is threefold. Of the people, by the people, for the people. Now, this is the definition of government. Now, you may not be elected by us. You should really do something for us. So many years after the handover, there are only two financial secretaries whom I've debated. One is Mr. Henry Tang. He's been kicked upstairs. I debated him by saying that we've got so much in our reserves, we have so much surplus, we have to do something to alleviate the plight of the underprivileged. Stanton Leung said that we should, instead of giving people fish, you have to teach people how to catch fish. You've got kids. Are you going to send your kids to universities? Now, without university education, people would have a hard time in a knowledge-based economy. Our investment in universities is half as much as our neighboring jurisdictions. We're trailing behind Singapore. Taiwan is also way ahead of us. We're not begging for mercy. We're asking for some kind of a system where I don't have to struggle to pay the rent. We want a system where if I work hard, my kids would be able to receive proper education. We want a system whereby if we work hard, we will get protection in retirement. If we work hard, we're going to improve a lot. Our situation will improve as the GDP improves. That's all we are asking for. We don't want a situation where we die because we don't have the means to see the doctor. We don't really want a situation where when we die, we can't even afford the columbarium urns. Are we asking for too much? Day in, day out, year in, year out. Our reserves are making us proud, but the reserves are fast becoming the fund for the White Elephant projects. Since the mid-tenure of Donald Tsang, the funding for the White Elephant projects has been increasing from a few $1 billion to $200, $300 billion. The government says that we shouldn't spend the money. We should be putting away the money into the future fund. We had the land fund in those days because the Chinese government was worried about the money being frittered away by the colonial administration. Now we have been handed over. There is no such thing anymore.
Some people say that democracy is fake. Let me quote Aristotle's. These countries usually carry a characteristic, and that is human rights are suppressed, and human individual rights are also suppressed. Freedom of religion is restricted, and there are restrictions on the development of NGOs, and sovereign countries would usually pursue certain objectives, but instead of actual performances. And these are characteristics of a tyrannism. So this is what we are. I would like to remind members that based on the arrangements for the debate, the committee will allocate 5 hours on this debate. This debate will end at about 3:15 p.m. Does any other member wish to speak? Ms. Ray Chan. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I'd like to talk about Head 144 on the CMAB. I do not support this head standing part of the schedule. In the past financial year, the difference between budget and the actual expenditure was more than 10%. In other words, the budget was not spent completely. In the new financial year, the budget is 17.2% higher than the actual expenditure of the previous year. They did not work on they did not work on the Constitution. When there are 5 programs under the CMAB, include mainland and Taiwan affairs. I saw one of the objectives which said promoting collaboration between the mainland, Macau, and Taiwan. So Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, Ray Chan, Kenneth Leung, and Andrew Wan, now I know why we could not enter Macau. No one could help us. We approached the Security Bureau, and they had no mechanism in place to help us because we are talking about another jurisdiction. Someone suggested that you have handed them a list, but you of course denied it. Under this program, they want to promote collaboration between Hong Kong and Macau SAR. What have they actually done? Have they helped the public and legislators tackle these problems? From what I know, every year, more than 10,000 Hong Kong people are denied entry into Macau due to security grounds. I now realize that this is within the ambit of the CMAB. If the Security Bureau then helped, it would be a great policy. Even if you ask me to show a visa, then you should let me know ahead of time so that I won't have to waste money on hotels and ferry tickets. For mainland affairs, the budget has increased by 26.9%, but they did not explain the reason why. They simply said that collaborations with the mainland will be deepened, so you will continue to launch offices in the mainland, so you can easily increase the budget by 50 or even 100%. I think there's redundancy with other bureaus on mainland affairs. There's an indicator called promoting trade opportunities. Isn't that the ambit of the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau? Why does Raymond Tam have to take care of that? And what indicators would be used to gauge the effectiveness of your spending? It's not justified. You talked about the Belt and Road Initiative. I think the Belt and Road should be within the ambit of the CDB. It's hard to justify the spike in budget. The CMAB also organizes celebrations in the mainland for the 20th anniversary of Hong Kong. I want to point out that there's a program under CMAB on the promotion of basic law. It's been 20 years since you started promoting the basic law. The basic law is very subjective. Well, perhaps the government's interpretation of the basic law is also problematic. When you talk about enhancing public understanding on the basic law, can anyone actually produce a checklist on the what the CMAB has done over the past year in promoting the basic law? If I'm to cut one bureau from the 18 bureaus, the CMAB might be the top candidate. There's something the CMAB should achieve within the current term government, and that is Program for Individual Rights or Human Rights, or Program 5. The Equal Opportunities Commission and Commissioner of Personal Data Office. And Raymond Tam faces a lot of constraints, and he had no say during consultation during the debate with the Society of the Students. At least he said something, so he was better than Lau Kong Wah. So I don't blame you, but I would blame C.Y. Leung and Carrie Lam. In terms of improving human rights, the Secretary did not live up to expectations. He completely failed. In 2017, items to be worked on in 2017 to 18, they would deal with the priority recommendations of the EOC and initiate discussions with LegCo. The Discrimination Ordinance Review report was published last March, and more than 70 recommendations were put forward. Some of them might be contentious, while others need time. But at least a dozen or so can be and should be done immediately. At the end, Raymond Tam only decided to implement 9 of them. And he failed to even implement guide dogs for the blind. The anti-discrimination ordinances have a history of over 20 years. They were enacted in 1995 or 96. There were a lot of deficiencies which should be reviewed. Let me cite an example. Under the sexual discrimination ordinance, there's legislation against sexual harassment, but it is highly restrictive and not comprehensive. For example, on buses, sexual harassment that takes place on the bus is not an offense under the SDO, because under the SDO there must be some form of relationship between both parties. For example, employer and employee, or between colleagues, or between service providers and customers. For example, flight attendants and passengers, doctors and patients, etc. Now we have made amendments so that they go both ways. I've been sexually harassed at the MTR. I sought help from the Equal Opportunities Commission because, but they said, sorry, the law doesn't apply to harassment between passengers, so no charges can be made. So you can see how outdated our laws are. I hope that the next term, in the next term, the CMAB would not just carry out 9 recommendations, or else you cannot fulfill all the requirements by 2047. And facilitating equal opportunities for people with different sexual orientations. And at a electrical panel, we just wrapped up discussions, and the secretary was again absent. And he only showed the report on the elimination of discrimination against sexual minorities by myself and Dr. Priscilla Leung. But the key is to legislate against discrimination on sexual orientation. And the government has been very vague. They only talked about studies and assessments, and they said by the end of this year they will proceed to the next step and prepare for consultation. So what are they actually consulting on? Legislating or not legislating? The government has no clear direction, even though this has dragged on for more than 20 years. In terms of legislation, I have opposite comments as or views as Dr. Priscilla Leung. But when I look at the government's work, they said that legislation is not needed, guidelines and education would be enough. So let's look at the guidelines and what they serve to achieve. More than 10 years ago, the CMAB came up with a set of guidelines called Employment Code of Practice on eliminating discrimination on sexual grounds. They suggest you to do it. They are asking your boss to do it, but not mine. So the government's guidelines often encourage people to do something. And they encourage people to build gender-neutral toilets, but they don't do it in their own facilities. For paternity leave or other issues, you have to take the lead before you can drive others to follow, but they are not doing it themselves. So the courts also ask why they are not following the code of practice, and they would say that they set the code themselves. That's why results have not been positive over the past 10 years. About 200 organizations have signed, and our officers can also sign. Even though these might not be significant, but at least we can let ourselves heard. What about the bodies receiving public subsidy? None of them ever signed them. Let's not talk about legislation. Just talk about the code of practice. Have you done your best in promoting it? The welfare organizations ask you for money every year. Have you asked them to sign? Of course, I know why they refuse to sign. Because they do not want to take the lead. Because they might be seen as supporting homosexuality. But if multiple organizations sign together, it won't be a problem. That's why the CMAB should do these. They talk about charters. Is this actually an improvement? I don't see what has been improved. Because the government is not taking the lead.
Yeah.
For instance, now I'd like to come to the Privacy Commissioner is also under the CMAB. The Personal Data Privacy Ordinance would regulate the transmission of our information across the boundary to the mainland. For instance, the Privacy Commissioner has issued a code for the private sector to follow. the private sector is asked to follow the code. However, the code is hard to implement or enforce. The government itself is not bound. It has not undertaken to comply with the code. So, to sum up, now, in terms of rights of the individuals and sexual minorities, I often talk about children and ethnic minorities, how this year maybe has been deficient in protecting them. For instance, we've asked to pass a motion which is non-binding on the administration is useless. So for this AB, it cannot do anything on the constitutional front. It cannot carry out duties under these programs. So, does any other members who haven't spoken would like to speak? If not, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong or Dr. Priscilla Leung. Madam Deputy, I speak to support the motion. I think at this stage we should talk about broader issues. So I think it is a good opportunity to discuss, given that this is already the last year of this term of government, and how do we assess the appraise the performance of this administration in the past 5 years in terms of budget. I think I'd like to talk about how to earn and how to spend. I think Hong Kong as a community has a strong sense of how to earn and how to spend. So this is the last year of this term of government. How will the next government take over and carry on with policies that we like and which we believe should be given more money, and policies that should be reviewed and where money should no longer be spent on them. Since the reunification, we talked about a small government and a big city, a big market. We talk about laissez-faire. My teacher, Mr. Andrew Wang, would like to talk about the beauty of a small government and a big market. Small is beautiful, he said. If we review the way the government's spent money since the handover, should we maintain this conservative approach? I think we are at a crossroad. I like free market as well. When I was younger, I had lived in another system for a few years, and I really prefer capitalism. So in 1990, when the Basic Law was passed, most people supported one country, two systems, where capitalism should be practiced in Hong Kong and socialism in the mainland. I think there are reasons for that. We all want to make use of the opportunities afforded to us in a free market, so that if we get paid for our efforts, we get rewarded for our efforts. So in Hong Kong, we wanted one country, two systems, and I think by two systems, we had capitalism in mind. That was the critical thing we had in mind. However, capitalism has undergone a lot of changes all over the world, from changes in politics, the political system, and also people's aspirations. And the same has happened in Hong Kong. I've discussed with mainland academics and experts that have influence over their government. So the mainland is moving towards a market economy or capitalism, whereas Hong Kong or the people in Hong Kong are moving towards socialism, and maybe 20 years down the road, these two systems may be swapped. Dr. Priscilla Leung, we are discussing how this 58 heads stand part of the schedule. So can you come back to the theme? Thank you, Chairman. I think you have to adopt the same standard. Many members were very detailed. She talked about the name of a street, and some talked about other matters. I hope you allow me to keep my speech intact. This is the first time I've spoken on this debate, and I don't want to be interrupted unfairly. All right, there are strong calls in the community that the government spent more on welfare and livelihood matters. There was no need for you to interrupt me, Chairman. I was about to say that the allocation of 60 hours to this debate is good compared to filibustering we had in the past. With the 60-hour limit, the number of quorum bells has greatly reduced. And I think at this stage, we should try our best to speak out. So time is a precious resource, and I hope we will continue to have fewer quorum bells and more opportunities to debate. We're now at this stage of the Appropriation Bill. All members have their own baby projects. They want more money to be channeled into their respective brainchild. But we should not spend this time on policies and issues already rehearsed time and again in panel meetings, in FC or other occasions. So I will not go to specifics in this debate. I dare not say that I've sat through all your speeches, but at least I've listened to half of them. I haven't seen an issue that has never been discussed in a relevant panel. I think it would be more practical if we do not repeat issues that have already been discussed in the past. While there were over 180 amendments, I think they are futile. They are not going to affect our motion, and I think feedback from the public is such that such a debate was rather futile. You refused to admit that you were filibustering. Yes, there's something good, because at least you admit that filibustering is not desirable. Mr. Leung Kwong, please refrain from using a mobile phone here. Please go on, Dr. Priscilla Leung. Thank you, Chairman, for asking him not to use his mobile phone here, although I think he is still so doing. All right. At this stage, I think we should consider whether these heads should stand part of the schedule. In fact, since the announcement of the budget this year, feedback I got from the community has been rather positive, although this is already towards the end of this government. I think what they like most is the public annuity scheme. So for those who are 65 with an investment of $1 million, they can be given $5,800 for a man and $5,300 for a woman. I hope that the scheme can be expanded next year so as to benefit more. It's true that if you can afford $1 million, you are part of the middle class. But then many people have drifted down shifted down the social ladder from a middle class to the poor, and from a working men to retired. So I think this public annuity scheme is desirable and it should be further enhanced. Another measure that is well received in the community is to spend $30 billion to strengthen services for the elderly and the disabled. People from all walks of life, including those from the middle class, commend this measure. Does that mean that we can not continue to improve? Well, we want dental services, mobile dental vans to visit all 18 districts. This is just a minor thing. How come the administration has refused to take on board this suggestion? Because this is a consensus of the pro-establishment and pan-democratic camps, and also drugs for an expensive drugs for rare diseases. Well, I received a letter recently on this. The administration should really give a green light to this. I don't think any sector here would oppose this, because if you have a family member who suffers from a rare disease, the whole family is going to be impacted. So for expensive drugs for rare diseases, please say yes. And we should not slash spending on public health care. I know that recently there is a spate of medical incidents causing people to think negatively about this. Now, public health care is one of the most important safety nets for the poor. Some can't even afford private insurance, healthcare insurance. And then we have to ask Mr. Tan Kim Paul how we can improve the practice of the insurance sector. After you're retired, you may not get a renewal of your healthcare insurance. So we should continue to pump money into public health care, in particular emergency services. We have friends serving A&E departments, and they can tell you that they are overloaded. So we should improve their manpower, equipment, and resources so as to prevent or minimize accidents arising from lack of resources and manpower. And we should also praise the government for the following. In 2013, I said John Zhang would only know how to gain political mileage. Well, he removed the part about improving water quality of the Victoria Harbour from the policy address. So sometimes the budget could not match the proposals in the policy address. I hope that come the next government, this mismatch will not happen again. And for this term, we must discuss retirement protection for the elderly. Universal retirement protection is a contentious thing because the spending can be tremendous. But can we provide for the elderly or the retired on different fronts? For instance, we can help them to join the workforce again. If they can find jobs that have need for their skills, and if they get $5,000-6,000 a month, and together with OALA or OH allowance, at least they can be basically protected. So in the coming 5-10 years, we must continue to discuss how we can provide for the elderly, because the population pyramid is going to be inverted very soon. For our young people, we have talked enough about TSA, whether it should be applied, administered as threes and so forth.
So it's not a question of the secretary, you dock his pay, the problem still remains. It is a question of the mindset of the Education Bureau. They believe in examination. The HKEAA, the Education Bureau, they all believe in examination. So I think that the chief executive and the whole government would radically revamp the policy. I'm pessimistic about one single secretary being able to change everything. And he may promise you everything, but the examination will go on, and this is not the direction that we should be headed. I'd like to spend the rest of the time heaping praise. I object to the notion of docking or the pay for the Environment Bureau. I've been reading up on the promenade arrangement. We'd like to have better quality of water and water taxis and so on. The Environment Bureau has put in a lot of effort in the term. They tried the dry weather interceptor, and I think they are seeking too little funding, and they're facing too much constraint. The Environment Bureau alone cannot spearhead any efforts to improve the water quality. I think there should be an interdepartmental and inter-bureau initiative within 10 years. I think $30 billion should be set aside to improve the water quality so that people will be able to enjoy the water quality. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, Chairman, I must apologize. I quote Aristotle. I think I've made a mistake. In order to correct myself, let me repeat. Aristotle said that a ruler that is not subject to any restriction would be seeking his own personal interest instead of the interest of the public. He would use extreme cunning and ruthless measures against the populace as well as the enemies. This is by way of a correction. I realized I was wrong once I've made a quote. Now this is let's deal with the East Kowloon and West Kowloon. We've spent so much money in them, and these are the places where we develop our culture. Now, the HAB Development Bureau and FHB and LCSD, of course, are the three bureaus that are involved. When we talk about West Kowloon district, you must remember we objected to the single tendering arrangement for the WKCD. Tung Chee Hwa brought in a number of consortia and designed everything. The idea would be similar to the East Kowloon arrangement. You may not be familiar, Mr. Chairman. The East Kowloon adopts a new model, and that is design, build, and operate DBO arrangement. Even for the pro-establishment members, they're urging the administration to think twice about it. In particular, in view of the Disneyland saga, Disneyland is raking in profits, but the Hong Kong government is standing to lose. They are making available land to meet the demand. We have frozen 60 hectares of land and a few thousand hectares of land, which is subject to height restriction. It is only reasonable that there are such concerns. Now, in the old days, the roof wasn't a good idea, and it was rumored that if a consortium would gets the bill, then they would get everything. And they were talking about Li Ka-shing at the time. If we feel that the single tender arrangement for West Kowloon should be overruled, then why is it that a decade on in East Kowloon we're going to build this high-tech sports park, which is costing us $31.9 billion? Why do we adopt such an arrangement again? From Stage-Appropriation to C.Y. Leung, both of them are on chummy relationship. C.Y. Leung is the second convener of EXCO after Sir S.Y. Chung. He's been working hand in gloves with Stage-Appropriation. Stage-Appropriation adopted this development model, which came in for a lot of criticism. Why is it that we have to adopt a similar arrangement again for East Kowloon? This is precisely why I think the Development Bureau and HAB should be taken to task. The high-tech sports park is undergoing development, and the Development Bureau wasn't consulted. I think this is the DAB and FTU's baby cruise terminal. It is really like a zombie. The other zombie that we're going to end up with will be the high-tech sports park. It was a sloppy idea at the time. We want to be a hub for sports. We like to promote sports. We like to promote elite sports, and we like to promote Hong Kong as a place for mega sports events and so on. Now, in East Kowloon, if we adopt the West Kowloon model, now this $31.9 billion project is of a large scale, and LCSD is controlling part of the venues, and they hope that a large consortium would be designing, building, and operating this project for a tenure of 25 years. This is good business. Chairman, if you stop being an electrical councillor, you better go there to share in the project. That they are building the project, they're operating the project for 25 years without much in the way of cost. It's only when they make a profit that the government will be able to share. That the government earmarks $31.9 billion, and even the DAB members are skeptical about it. I think we can build that, and they have to operate the venue at their own risk. C.Y. Leung is trying to build this East Kowloon sports park, and this is a political reward. Now, it was supposed to be a 50,000 capacity stadium costing $8.8 billion or $10 billion. Now, we don't have many soccer matches that would accommodate 10,000 people, except for some foreign players coming in. We're building this for the entertainment business. If we do not build this stadium, there wouldn't have been any arguments. If we build a venue for the people of Hong Kong to have a leisure time in, to spend a holiday in, that would be fine. But you're building this monstrosity there, and you don't know how to operate it. Furthermore, there is the shopping mall, the hotel, and F&B, and so on. So on that score, I have to hold the government responsible for that. Why did they inflate this? And they are more like presenting a fair piece of meat to the consortia. West Kowloon, it is also a flop. We told them not to make it so luxurious, and they have to keep it moderate. But they are recalcitrant. Chairman, you have to understand that for the WKCD, it is the jewel in the crown. Now, for the younger members, you shudder when you walk in because everything is so pricey. It costs you $5 more if you drink a can of Coke. So, for the West Kowloon, this will become a place for the rich. It is a transport hub. The XRL is located at the terminus is located at WKCD. So I think it is superfluous for us to carry on with the WKCD. The government is really insane. They are setting aside land for WKCDA to cooperate with the land developer. Are we excising our land to the developers? So it is a place for the rich to get richer. So what are they doing there on the eastern and western part of Kowloon? They may look different, but there is so much commonality between them. And that is, we are misusing the coastal land, the water frontage, and we are handing over the land to the developers. I'm not sure whether you've been to WKCD. Well, it'd be like a chicken wanting to drink water, the sea water. I mean, it can't. It is on the strategic location of Hong Kong, and the general public will simply not be able to enjoy the facilities. And this is a place for the rich to get richer. And the government is asking these consortia to develop the project, and if it runs out of money, it would be handing land over to them. Chairman, to walk out to the waterfront, have you ever seen poor people there? Now, the Tamer Park, of course, I can use it. But there is so much restriction. I can't smoke, I can't drink. If you go further out, you can. But this is an opportunity for people to get rich. Now, the World Expo, the shows are pricey, and food is expensive. Chairman, you've been there, you must be aware. And it is said that it is an inevitable project. The cruise terminal, once again, it is touted as inevitable. The Development Bureau, in the process of development, listened to a bright spark called C.Y. Leung, and he is chanting the mantra like we're running out of Grade A office space, running out of the cruise terminal. Now he is doing this. Have you been to the cruise terminal? Do you feel bad about it? Now, if you want to try to catch a bus, it is very, very difficult.
It's the same for the cruise terminal and Expo. Our urban design is based on a fool or C.Y. Leung. He made 49 amendments and he allowed people to know about it. I hope the same happens for East Kowloon and West Kowloon. I asked the Home Affairs Bureau, Development Bureau, and Food and Health Bureau about policy making, and it's about the chief executive. I want to criticize Carrie Lam and John Chang as well. But he has quit, so I don't want to be sidetracked. The use of our land is completely biased towards businessmen for making money. We don't have enough land for housing, but we dare not touch the brownfield sites, and they are on short-term tenancies, and now he's trying to work with the green belt. A lot of people speculate on properties and they do not actually live in the apartments. We have property curbs, but we do not do something about the land. So what are we actually doing? The land actually belongs to the people, but they are turning it into a tool for making money. It's for making money instead of serving the people. I think that's all I want to say. Perhaps Nathan Law will continue. Chairman, we talked about the waterfront, and Mr. Leung Kwok Hong talked about East Kowloon and West Kowloon. In May 2008, we met the then Secretary for Development, Carrie Lam. West Kowloon has been looking for harbourfront planning for a long time, and the West Kowloon residents want themselves to be heard. So the government has been biased. At that time, in 2011, Mrs. Carrie Lam fulfilled a promise by accepting our proposal. That's why we had a development at Hong Kong. At the central waterfront, you were able to come up with a celebration zone, cruise zone, a water activity zone, and sports zone. But at the West Kowloon waterfront or promenade, I have not seen anything in the promenade. So which bureau is actually taking the lead? Sometimes we don't know who we should talk to. Is it the Environment Bureau or Planning Department? They said they have delegated to the Home Affairs Bureau. So why would the HAB deal with promenade planning? What is the division of work? Who actually takes the lead? The HAB should work with culture, but harbourfront planning should be about development and planning, and you have to work with the Environment Bureau. We are happy at the central developments, but it's been almost 10 years since we first proposed the developments. Hopefully the next term government would hear us. We shouldn't have the security for security here only. This is a final debate. More government officials should be here to listen, even though you are coming to the end of your term. We are still working very hard. I want to respond to what Mr. Ray Chan said. He thinks the CMAB has been moving too slow. Myself and him were involved in the group on eliminating discrimination against sexual orientation. I think for issues without consensus, we can go low. For those with a consensus, we should go faster. there's no consensus on this issue. I have been telling the government that once you begin legislative consultation, I think we would end up with a lot of conflicts, just like the political reform. The group suggested using administrative measures, and I also suggested setting up coordination centers so that in case of disputes on both sides or because of different views on sexual orientation and the relevant discriminations, well, myself and Mr. Ray Chan have received such cases. So could we set up this kind of center to alleviate the conflicts? And in terms of publicity by the government, you often have APIs on RTHK. Hopefully those kind of publicity or promotions would be impartial and don't make it sound like that Hong Kong has very serious discrimination against homosexual persons. I think this is the case in Hong Kong. If superiors in a company support same-sex marriage or movements, well, if they stand against their subordinates, then they would face pressure in the workplace. So hopefully these conflicts can be eased at the workplace. I think legislation is not the way to go. Or, well, on the other hand, they might escalate the conflicts. So we should turn to policy instead of legislation. So I do not blame the CMAB for going slow. For the next term government, for issues with consensus, I hope they would remain open. And the same goes for education policy. For issues with no consensus, or the contentious issues, they can go slow. The incoming chief executive mentioned a number of controversial issues, and she said she would first look to understand the issues first. Thank you. Mr. Nathan Law. Thank you, Mr. Lam. I will speak on the Department of Justice performance. We saw that different members have different areas of interest. And we have not talked about the DOJ in some of our amendments, so I wish to cover them. Rule of law is very important to Hong Kong. It's one of the cornerstones of Hong Kong. And it helps maintain our competitive edge internationally. I visited Cyberport a few days ago, and I met some startup owners. Startups have been a trend for a long time in the mainland, and some people told me that for mainland products to be globalized, they must first come to Hong Kong. Mainland companies have to go through Hong Kong because we have trustworthy brands, and our system also gives confidence. If this system collapses and we corrupts just like the mainland, then our competitive edge in the international arena will be affected. So this explains why rule of law is so important to Hong Kong. In recent years, the DOJ has not done its job in defending the rule of law. They have allowed Beijing to interfere and meddle with rule of law in Hong Kong, and the DOJ has not played the role of gatekeeper properly. We have seen a number of protests, of black shirt protests. First of all, in 2014, against the NPCSC decision, 1,800 people joined, and the second protest was about the recent interpretation of law. 3,000 people hit the streets. Legal professionals are esteemed people in our society. But why have we seen so many protests in black shirts during the tenure of C.Y. Leung? That's because we face a huge crisis in rule of law during his office. I think I will use the interpretation of the basic law as an example. We have seen a lot of saga about taking of oaths or even Hong Kong independence. Beijing interpreted the law, and their words were final. So let's see what the basic law says about interpreting the law. For the call of final appeal of the Hong Kong SAR, the CFA invites NPCSC to interpret the law. There was a major backlash because the courts or CFA or the government had yet to say anything before the NPCSC bypassed this step and proceeded to interpretation of the law, and the DOJ remained silent all along. The Secretary of Justice did not say anything, nor did his team. So it made people wonder why, whether the DOJ was really neutral and whether they are defending the rule of law, or were they just following the order of C.Y. Leung and Beijing? There was a very big question mark. In the interpretation of the law, we all know that it was against the basic law provisions. More importantly, the society, DOJ, and prosecution camp seem to be resorting to this weapon against some people with different views. This is about our core values, and our civil values are in danger. In a society, a system should not be jeopardized because of different views. If the values are universal, if they are considered basic rights, we should not change our practice in terms of freedom of speech. You might have heard people saying that no matter how much I disagree with you, I would defend your right to speak till I die. So if you meet someone with a different political view as you, if that person is in danger, you would still try to rescue him or her. But in the interpretation of the law, it was not what happened. If someone said something in contravention of the political ideologies of the nation, you would be stigmatized. We talked about interest and welfare or constitutional system. A lot of policies are biased and they could not take care of the weak. But the interpretation of law was very different because the focus was not the distribution of interests. But the key was that no dissent is allowed in Hong Kong in the eyes of Beijing. If the DOJ believes in the system and believes in the rule of law, and if they want to defend everyone's rights from abuse, they should voice out. They should say that even though this person has an opposite view as Beijing, they should be able to take part in an election because the right to vote and be elected are basic rights, but they failed to do so.
And the damage to our system is such that the country can impose its ideology over its people. So this is blatantly using ideology to promote struggles and conflicts within the people. And the S4J has been very derelict in his duty since he hasn't spoke up on this. Now, I myself, as the target of judicial review by Siwan Leung, and the SJ is the one assisting him to do it. Now, interpretation of the basic law is unjust. It has distorted our values, and SJ should have the sense that this is something wrong, and he shouldn't help the CE. People may say that you always have to be law-abiding with no regard for whether the law itself is in line with social justice, whether the law has been imposed or trampled on and meddled with by the NPCSC. SJ has never explained this to the public. There are different tiers of being law-abiding. Well, we have clear laws to abide by is the simplest level, lowest level, and we should use the law to achieve justice. The law may be outdated and may cause harm to society as a result, and the law can also be manipulated by those in power to suppress dissidents, and these are what we call draconian pieces of legislation, including the public order ordinance. So even if you are being law-abiding, may not be a manifestation of social justice, SJ should have explained this to the public, so that people have a clear understanding of our core values. So we have great doubts as to whether SJ has become a tool of the administration. It is no longer independent of the administration to see whether the executive is behaving in a proper manner. SJ is not playing the role expected by the community. So I have to oppose allowing this head involving the SJ to stand part of the schedule. I'd like to comment on the Security Bill as well. Unfortunately, the Undersecretary, Ms. Lee Ka-chiu, is outside the chamber. We have talked about the powers of the police and malpractice and abuse of power. It is hard to tackle that in the Appropriation Bill. However, IPCC has failed to operate effectively. In my previous speech, I commented on this. Whether it be activists or dissidents or protesters or members of the public, the damage to them is getting bigger and bigger. And as a result, the police force has been doing very badly in terms of its popularity rating and also credit rating and its credibility. When you see on the TV that a baton has smashed the head of a protester, then the damage is already done. The public looks up to the police to protect themselves, not just to help the executive, but to defend the interests and life and property of members of the public. And the police should adhere and uphold its principles. For the past few decades, we have whitewashed the police. In the 1960s and 70s, the police did not enjoy a high esteem. People used to say that if you were a good guy, you wouldn't be a cop. Now things were changed, and then recently the popularity rating has dropped because the executive has condoned the police to abuse its power. There has been no reflection on the part of the senior management of the police. When the senior officials are not doing things right, the subordinates tend to follow. there are many complaints against the police. And more and more, they are exposed by the media. So naturally, people feel that our policemen are not serving the public. If you feel that the law and order and other things have to be maintained by the police must secure the confidence of the public. It should not become a tool of the executive. At least there should be some restraint and discipline shown on the part of the police. Now, I also like to talk about the Correctional Services Department. The reason I have raised this is for many people who have recently watched movies or there is a local production on prisoners, and the movie is about stories reviewed by young offenders, and the CSD gave the director a letter. Now, since you don't have any evidence, you should not say that the story is based on real stories. The wording used was very strong, and CSD refused to admit to the facts revealed in the movie. But for ex-offenders, and even myself, I have asked some of my friends what was reviewed in the movie was 80% true. The Correctional Services Department would beat up the offenders. They had all sorts of insulting tricks and gestures. For instance, offenders were asked to use excreta to brush the teeth. They were asked to drink their own urine, and examples abound. I asked someone who was once in a detention center, and he told me the same story. This is because for the Correctional Services Department, it should have the element of correction. The officers don't really want these offenders to turn over a new leaf in the future. So the Security Bureau must investigate such matters. 3 members are still waiting to speak, and after I've invited these 3 members to speak, I will give the floor to government officials to respond. Mr. Shiu Ka-chun. Mr. Chairman, the first time I spoke on the Appropriation Bill, I told the FS that I would give him this book, the unequal opportunities faced by the rich and the poor kids. So the rift we have in society is not just between the blue ribbons and the yellow ribbons, but there is a wealth gap, and this is the rift between the rich and the poor. Unfortunately, the FS is not here. When he introduced himself, he said that he was from a grassroots family. He had gone through hard times, and therefore he had a lot of sympathy for kids, young people, and elderly persons from the lower stratum of society, and he really want to help them. Unfortunately, he's not here. I don't know whether I should give him this book or not, or should I give it to the next FS. It says here, no matter how hard you try, it's useless because you face unequal opportunities. 28 life stories where people cannot move up the social ladder. And I'd like to respond to the remarks made by Mr. Martin Liu. He said that our amendments could help people's livelihood, but then there's no contradiction between these amendments and money for celebrating the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR. First, I thank him for his recognition that our amendments can help the poor. Polarization in society is not mainly due to politics. You go to Sham Shui Po, Mong Kok, and different districts. Do you know the price of old carpet nowadays? Please do not just learn about the land price. Do you know? You have to pick 2 cans before you can make 10 cents, and also 1 cartier of cardboard before you can get 10 cents. So there is no need for me to elaborate on how poor people are. So when we spoke on different topics in the Appropriation Bill, you understand how come the rich are so rich and yet the poor are so poor that they are starving. Would it be the reintroduction of TSA and employment of retired policemen to be inspectors of RCHEs to improve their quality? Well, when I spoke on these 3 amendments, I spoke on the spirit of the amendments. I was saying that where your heart is where your money is. You talked about helping the poor and the elderly and the disadvantaged, and then we think of people in Yam Chau Street, Sham Shui Po, and the street sleepers under the pedestrian footbridges, and even the outsourced cleansing workers that are working so hard day in day out in this council building. Once a job is outsourced, the salary is cut by almost 1/3. They only get $8,000 per month. Together with bonuses and other fringe benefits, they only get $8,600. That's $4,000 less if you were civil servant or a permanent employee. These are living human beings. There's $4,000 gone, and that weigh heavily on these workers. I have got 3 amendments. I can say this to the FS. I can withdraw these amendments so long as this is really a participatory budget. What is meant by participatory budget? This is being promoted in many parts of the world. Participatory budgeting, that is, the people are involved in the drafting of the budget, and there is an established mechanism for people to influence the budget. Now, we can only look at the draft estimates, and we talk about slashing this and that, and all 180-odd amendments have been vetoed, and the public have no choice but to look on helplessly. Now, I am talking about whether the public can be party to the writing out of the budget, because this is a product of democracy, and this is different from consultative democracy. In participatory budgeting, the 2 sides look at their pros and cons and arguments before they come to consensus. Of course, the public will have to have access to basic information on public finances before they can participate in this process. Now, in Taipei, you may not like me to talk about Taipei so often, but I think there are lessons to learn from that city. They have participatory budgeting. The government would offer courses to let the public understand what is meant by public motions, and there will be counters to help the people to draft and to move motions before making a decision.
And then departments will be offering advice of different types, and then the proposal would be on display, and priorities will be accorded for implementation by the administration. For the first year, there are 66 proposals that have been endorsed. And the key thing is people can turn from being passive to being active, and they can extend this to the day-to-day life. We understand that we cannot achieve democracy overnight. The participatory budgeting would be full of challenges, and that there would be a lot of time that would be needed. But this is a part of growing up. If the administration really wants to heal the division, if the administration doesn't want to have these 187 amendments, if the pro-establishment members feel that we're wasting their time, the way to go, the most effective way to go, the most fundamental way to go is not to cut off the nose to spite our face, but to engage in participatory budgeting so that we can be convinced. It's a question of whether the administration is prepared to delegate the power for the public to decide which way we should go. Over the years, we keep saying that we have to do things ourselves. Today, I'm talking about budgeting ourselves. This is our land. This is our budget. This is our government. This is our money. Can't we budget ourselves? If we can achieve that, it would be hard for me to move any amendments. I think I can say the same about other members. If we have participatory budgeting, there will not be any more amendments. Dr. Kwok is not here. Dr. Fernando Zhao. Chairman, we are debating whether we should have various heads stand part of the bill, and these are related to the 185 amendments. They have to do with the different bureaus, the policy areas, and also the funding proposals. Chairman, this kind of voting is important. I heard from Mr. Lau, Lai Kong, that the pandams are merely talking, and we're talking a lot about livelihoods and democracy, and he's saying that we're not doing things, we fail to achieve anything at all. Now, this is a strange kind of mentality. Now, why do we have to be successfully fighting for things? Now, it seems that we are subordinate to the government. Why does the government have to be above us? So I will never say that I managed to fight for certain things and call this my achievement. I think this is belittling ourselves. But this is an incompetent government. This is an unaccountable government. Why do we have to fight for a better deal from this administration? That aside, I'd like to explain to the members of the public what we are doing, what sort of mechanism we're in. Now, we highlighted all these problems. Do we have to keep fighting and begging the administration to do certain things in order to improve livelihood, to improve the political setup, and to take a step forward? I don't think we have to be subordinating ourselves like this. The pro-establishment members are in a majority. If they object to the sums standing part of the bill, that we have so many heads, so much funding, this lot of funding would be gone, and that would include the remuneration for the bureau chiefs, the remuneration for the FS. Now, if this scenario plays out as expected, then the government officials will not get paid, and they would be concerned. They would sit us down and talk, and they would discuss with us what we want. Electrical members do have the power to dock their pay, and if they really get their pay docked, they would really get serious and talk to us about our aspirations. A couple of days ago, by thanks to the chairman, you were in agreement that we should not drill excessively the students, and there was a cross-party group that met the CS and also the Undersecretary for Education. We are asking for a choice to be given back to the parents and the students. You may want to get on with the test, but the students should be given a choice. But they didn't give a damn. Chairman, you're part of the pro-establishment camp. You're sitting on so many votes. Why don't you tell the administration that if you don't let the parents and students exercise their choice, then that this part of the bill would not be incorporated, then they would be in trouble. We're talking about $600 million for the 20th anniversary, and if they lose the money, then President Xi Jinping would be holding them responsible. This is Legislative Council. We have the power to approve or not to approve the budget. This is legitimate power backed up by legislation. Why doesn't the pro-establishment camp use this power? Now you're enjoying all these majority votes, you're enjoying these majority seats. What have you done? You're not doing things that are as simple as that. Whatever the administration presents to us, you would be pressing a button in support like a rubber stamp. What clout do you have? How can you fight for a better deal for the members of the public? You merely pay lip service. We are really objecting. We are being consistent. I'm going to vote against this budget. But you're commanding the majority of the seats. Whatever is presented here, you would just take them as they come. When it comes to livelihood, you make it sound as if you are just as concerned about the livelihood. You like to see people housed in PRH. You don't want SDUs. You don't want a long queue at the A&E department. On a question as important as this, where has the pro-establishment camp disappeared to? They would be frightened even if you submit one single amendment. We don't need to have the split voting. The pro-establishment members can be in control. Even if we are in agreement, without your support, the budget will not be approved. So what is Mr. Kenneth now saying? He is saying that we're merely paying lip service. We cannot get anything done. And it is you who are paying lip service. You're giving up on the mechanism. This mechanism may not be totally democratic. At least we have the power, we have the authority to make the administration accountable. Why do you give up on your power? I cited all these statistics regarding the disabled, the elderly, waiting for years on end to be housed, and many of them cannot make it to these homes, and you expressed concerns year after year. Why don't you do anything about it? You could just veto the Appropriation Bill. You just pick one of the amendments that we propose, you can cut the $640 million for the 28. They would be really living in fear. So please do not be hypocritical. You say that we are showing a bad example for the kids. Junius Ho and the collusion between Holden Chow and C.Y. Leung. Who's setting a bad example? Who's presenting a warped argument? Who's calling a snack a horse? In this council, we have to be representative of the general public. We have to highlight the injustice in the community. In taking forward public policy, we can engage the administration in discussion. We can exchange views. We would not say that we're always right, or anybody is always right, but there can be a consensus that can be forged. Lots of them, the hostel for children, the home for children, and people have to be waiting for years and years on end. They are in desperate situation. They need to have care and attention outside their homes. Why don't you do anything at all? Why is it that the pro-establishment members are not doing anything at all? The subcommittee on children's rights, we have seen the hospital authority admitting that there are so many children under the age of 18 who are subject to abuse, and there are family members who have abused drugs and so on. They cannot stay at home, and they do need to have a home, and they're stuck in hospitals, and they're stuck in hospitals for months and years. This is a ridiculous situation, and this is happening right in front of our eyes in a cosmopolitan city like Hong Kong. Is there any controversy? Is it the FTU, Liberal Party, the DAB, or the BPA that are in opposition? All of you said that they should be assisted, but what have you done? What have you done to make the administration do something? We enjoy the power to make the government do things, but we're giving up on the power. Today, this debate is one of the most important debates every year, because the decision would be legally binding. It would impinge on the administration's funding, and this will affect every single one of the officials. Can they afford not to listen to the pro-establishment members? Street sleepers, they have to be housed next to the refuse collection points. When they are reprovisioned, they are putting them together. Are you in agreement? Do you think that the hostels for the street sleepers should be side by side with the refuse collection points? Is it the right move? I've been to the Yau Ma Tei Center the other day. I talked with the people there, and the hygienic condition leaves so much to be desired. It is a refuse collection point, a regional one, Mr. Chairman. This is not the refuse collection point in your building. Industrial buildings, commercial buildings, PRH units, there are refuse chambers, but we're talking about the regional refuse collection points.
There are refuse collection vehicles going in and out all the time, but we told you to put them in different places. Why don't you reprovision the hostel in situ? Rather, you moved it away so that it is next to a refuse collection point, and then the original site was used as a an opera center. It's all right for you to provide an opera center, but don't you understand? It's not that we do not have sites. It's not that we don't have money. You could have done anything. If there is no land, you can form land. With one announcement, you can resume land. Just look at what we are always doing. The URA is doing it in sub-districts, and the Development Bureau is doing so much construction in Yuen Long South, NT North, NT Northeast, NT West, and then Lantau. You're doing so much construction. If there is no land, you go for reclamation. You can even create an entire artificial island. You pour in tens of millions of dollars. You think it's all right. And they're all approved by this council. The PWSC, the FC, we are approving all these projects all the time, and then the budgets every year, they are approved. But I like to ask this question. I like to ask the pro-establishment members about what I just said, about what we have always said: dental services for the elderly, dental services for the handicapped, and there is not enough money, you say, so you would just finish off with the old appointments. But there is no controversy about this. If there is no controversy, why don't you chip in to force the administration to do something? But you would just say, okay, we already gave our views and then the administration did nothing. But as councillors, we must make use of our authority to make the administration accountable. If we don't do that, how responsible are we? The pro-establishment camp, you can object to the incorporation of these heads. I will ask Mr. Shukafai to be the last speaker in this debate, and after that I'll call upon public officers to respond. Thank you, Chairman. I have heard many pro-establishment and non-establishment members speak on the budget today, especially Dr. Fernando Zhang, who has just spoken, and also Dr. K.K. Kwok. I heard them say that the administration only poured money into white elephant projects and turned a blind eye to the disadvantaged, as if the pro-establishment members only supported projects and that the administration and ourselves did not do anything for the disadvantaged. But from this budget, I can see some data, and I'd like to share the data with the citizens. In terms of infrastructure, in 2012-2013, it is about $62 billion. And then this year, it is increased to $86.6 billion, or 4.7%. As for poverty, helping the elderly and the disadvantaged, in 2012-13 and also 2017-18, first it is 42.8 billion, and this time around it is 73.3 billion, or 71%. Just now, the project cost jumped by 4.7% only. And this year around, we are improving the lot of the elderly. And the elderly people who could be included were, instead of 37%, now we cover 47%. And every year they would get 10,000 to 30,000 more if they are the first 500,000. And about transportation and medical services, as you know, we have the $2 concessionary fare for elderly people, and also there is the elderly medical service voucher. Therefore, from last year to this year, in terms of transportation, an increase of 400%, medical vouchers, an increase of 1,000%. From these figures, I can't see how what Dr. Fernand and Dr. K.K. Kwok said had come to pass? Why is it that they are saying the administration did nothing to the disadvantaged? Mr. Chairman, unless these figures are fake, this is what they're telling us. Only 4.7% increase for projects, but over 70%, 400%, and so on and so forth, and 1,000% for the people who need our help. It is right, Chairman, for us to increase resources to help those in need, and the LP supports it. But as non-establishment members, they are saying that the SARG and the pro-establishment camp have not supported the effort. That is totally inappropriate. We have always been asking the administration to help the needy. Business members and our friends pay a lot of taxes with the sole aim of helping those in need. In this budget, the data are there for all to see. If you have not read the budget and if you have just listened to those members, then it would really seem that the administration and pro-establishment members are very unreasonable. But that is not what the figures are telling us, Chairman. That is why I have to put the record straight. Some members think that there is a lot more to be done about certain things. I agree, but resources have to be allocated amongst the different needs. They say if money is spent on projects, they think it is a waste. Chairman, every country, every city, and if you know anything about economics, you need to stimulate internal demand, and you must do it through major infrastructure, and it can create jobs for the grassroots and the construction industry. They used not to have work, but steel benders are earning over $2,000 per day. And the low-skilled workers, well, aren't they having a much better life now? This is because there are infrastructural projects. And then also other people will know that you are a city that is developing. The co-location for XRL will again be controversial, but the entire world envies China, which has the most developed express rail system, and it can take us all the way to Africa. But for this Hong Kong section, we are still arguing whether we should be joined to the network. Chairman, how much longer do we have to be involved in political controversies? Don't we want our economy to progress? Just now we heard Mr. Xiu Ka-chun talk about Taipei. Taipei is a democratic place. I also envy people in Taipei, but look at the Taiwan economy in the past 1 or 2 decades. Also, look at Japan. In the last 2 decades, what has happened to Japan's economy? The budget talks about per capita GDP, and it is standing at $44,000 for Hong Kong. And we have exceeded that of Japan. We used to envy Japan, but what has happened to Japan? Well, since they are a fully democratic country, they have placed emphasis on controversies and arguments in all democratic elections, and they have slighted their economy. Now, my knowledge of economics tells me that if we are only involved in political arguments, then it's not easy to develop the economy. Look at Singapore and Macau. How are they developing? 20 years ago, my friends were telling me that, when you hear about people from Macau, you wouldn't envy them. But today, even Hong Kong people are trying to emigrate to Macau. In Macau, there are only 600,000 people, but here we have over 7 million. Why is our economy not as good? Everybody wants to have democracy, but at the same time, we should seek to develop the economy and do things for people's livelihood. This is what councillors should do. This is what the people want to see. And after 20 years, we're still talking about democracy. But what about our economy? Hong Kong businesses are not doing well. There are district council elections, there is the electoral election and CE election. And we are spending so much time on politics. What I want to say is, Chairman, even if all 70 members today are Democrats, even the chairman, yourself, is a Democrat, and even the CE is a Democrat. Okay, I let you be the governing body. Don't you have to provide housing for people? Now the property prices are so high. Don't you have to find land to build more housing? If there is not enough labor, don't you have to import labor? And how can you help young people move up the career ladder? Even if you are the governor, even if you are the CE, and even if you are the electoral president, you still have to work on those things. They have to arguing for 20 years and they want to be in the seat of power, and still they have to do those things. Why don't we just go for that today? Why don't you develop the economy today? It's all right for you to argue about politics, but at the same time you need to develop the economy. What I want to say is, therefore, Chairman, we have been embroiled in arguments and Hong Kong would be dragged down. Hong Kong is facing the serious problem of housing. What should we do? You can point your fingers and then you need to construct housing. And you need land, you need materials, you need workers, Chairman, right? Where is the land going to come from? I said many times, whenever people say property prices have spiraled and then people criticize the situation, then how can you help the people? You want to help them, you have to find land. You want to find labor that is affordable, so the housing that results will be affordable so people can have housing. You always say it's people who live in subdivided units are in dire straits. I know that as well, but if you want to solve the problem, you need to know what the problem is. The core issue is that we lack land. It was said that at a place in the New Territories there are 74 households, and it was said that the government planned to build 14,000 units, but now it's reduced to 4,000 units. And instead of providing land for 14,000 families, we are keeping the housing just for 74 households. So there is a delay, and then people say there should be no reclamation because the dolphins need to swim, the seahorses need to live there. And then yesterday it is said that on the periphery of country parks, the CE says we should consider building housing there, and then the green groups say no. Then where are Hong Kong people going to live? Some people say we should emigrate to the mainland, and then you said this is integration with the mainland. Now, what are we ending up with? It's a cycle. They criticize the administration, but we all know what the core problem is. If you really want to solve the housing problem, then every time we want to find land, then they should all come out and support it. Of course, we shouldn't touch the harbor. But if those are remote places like Lantau and also the boundary or periphery of country parks, look at the photos. We could see that they are also on the fringe of the urban area. Why don't you allow us to use those areas? If you can't solve the housing problem, well, I understand totally the feelings of young people, because any small flat will fetch $6 to $7 million and they are getting just $10,000 salary. They will, of course, turn the tables. But please think about what we can do for young people. Let us work for people's environment. Let us go for infrastructure. Let us attract people to come to Hong Kong and build our economy, meaning that people can make money. When people have money, they will have a good life. If you have money, you pay a lot of taxes, and then you will be helping those people in need. Why don't you just focus on distributing money? It's easy to give out money, but is it going to come from your own pocket? It's people's money. You need to think about how to give money to the needy, but you have, first of all, to make the money. And also in the process, there are many non-establishment members who talked about policies.
For the Hong Kong police force, it is one of the best police forces around the world. This year, the figures tell us that in terms of the detection rate of crimes, it's highest and the crime rate is the lowest over the years. So how can you tell me the police force are not performing? We saw videos on YouTube all the time how police have become so restrained and they are being insulted upon by others and they still remain restrained. Well, whenever I have some troubles, I will call up the police to ask them for help. Now, who are they going to call if they have run into some problems? You are trying to undermine people's confidence in the police. What are they doing here? Of course, are all police officers, 100% of them, not are doing well? No one is making a mistake. Well, only a very, very small minority of police officers do wrong. Police officers are the cornerstone of our law enforcement efforts. If we don't support them, whom are we going to support? Are we going to support the triad societies? So, I hope that the public of Hong Kong can tolerate more the police and try to put yourselves into their shoes, understand their feelings. In the establishment subcommittee, we have been arguing about the creation of a chief superintendent post because there is more technology crimes in Hong Kong. The number has increased by 600%. We want to create this post to help Hong Kong people so that they would not be cheated by the swindlers. I've been arguing for this for a long time. I find it very strange. We try to create a post who is dedicated to crack down on online scams. We want to stop that kind of thing. And then I still have to put up an argument for so long. Why? Isn't it politics or what? So, Chairman, as a legislator in Hong Kong, I hope that all fellow members can serve the good of Hong Kong. If we continue with our political bickering, what are we going to end up with? Hong Kong, this year is the 20th anniversary of the SAR's establishment. I hope that all the fellow members can pause in our political bickering. Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. Chairman, the Council is now scrutinizing having the 58 heads standing part of the schedule, and there are amendments to these 58 heads. I hope that the legislators can bear Hong Kong's people's interest in mind so that government have the resources to implement the policies and boost our economy and develop Hong Kong. I hope that the members can support the sums for the 58 has been part of the schedule. So I speak. I now put the question to you, and that is that the sums for the 58 has read out by me at the beginning of the 7th debate stand part of the schedule. With those in favour, please raise their hands. I'll now put this to the vote. Dr. Fernando Zhang claims the division. The division bell will ring for 5 minutes. Members, please keep quiet.
請各位同事返回。
Members, please return to your seats.
開始表決。
Voting begins. Please check your vote. If there are no further questions, voting is closed. The results are displayed. 39 present, 23 for, 15 against. I think the question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. I now put the question to you, and that is that the schedule stands part of the bill. In accordance with Rule 68(4) of the Rules of Procedure, this question shall be put without amendment or debate. With those in favor, please raise their hands. Mr. Raymond Chan claims the division. The division bell will ring for 1 minute. Voting begins. Please check your votes. If there are no questions, voting is closed. The results are displayed. 43 present, 26 for, 16 against. The question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. The committee now considers the clauses of the bill.